Thank you everyone for tuning in. Massive thank you to Volker and Emma for joining us today. Really interested in this one. So I was just talking before everyone was in the waiting room there. Emma is somebody that we saw recently on the Aspiring Women Speakers group that we do. And it was such an interesting session around like the art of asking and the importance of asking and that kind of thing. And we found that so often people within the new fractional group that we've started are coming to us and saying, the question on everyone's lips is, how do I find my next client? How do I find new clients? And yeah, from listening to Emma's session, it was just like, there was all this kind of, wow, I need to kind of get that advice and share that with this community. Volker as well, a CRO and somebody that I met recently and had a lot of great ideas and strategies for how to pick up work and that kind of thing. So I thought we'd bring you guys together and just answer a few questions from everyone else here. So it's kind of part fireside chat, part roundtable. If anyone's got any questions, anyone's got anything they want to ask or say, please just put your virtual hand up there or put a chat on the session there. Really keen for you guys to get as much as you can out of it as well. So yeah. Before we crack on then, Emma, Volker, if I could just ask you to just give like a sort of 30-60 second kind of overview, bit of background, and why you're here. Emma, perhaps if I could start with you, that'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It was the last session was amazing, and it's really lovely to see faces as well, because so often we do these, we don't always see faces. So thank you for all keeping your videos on. My name is Emma Alexander. I'm a commercial photography specialist, which might feel a little bit left field. I've had 20 years experience in the creative industry, and I've worked with clients like Google, Polestar, BMW, Chivas Regal, Guinness, Unilever, a whole gamut of household names over the years. And I now head up two separate businesses. One is I'm the solo founder of a commercial production company called Bran. So I'm not a photographer, I'm not a filmmaker, I'm a producer. I do all the back end logistics that go into bringing big commercial advertising and film shoots to life. And then on the flip side, and probably more interesting to the fractional consulting community, I'm the co-founder of Wisern, which is a business development platform for creatives. And Wisern really sits at the intersection of consultancy, mentorship, and ed tech. So it operates as a two-sided marketplace, giving freelancers and micro business owners within the creative industry access to industry-leading experts for micro advice. We call it micro advice for micro businesses. So we're really serving, we're empowering, we're kind of upskilling a really unique tier of professional creatives, but also giving industry experts an opportunity to kind of grow portfolio careers, and really kind of generate additional revenue based on their incredible knowledge, basically. So it's a really interesting model. It's one that we're seeing growing rapidly, exponentially over the last sort of 5-10 years. And a lot of our experts want to give back to the wider community, but they don't know how. They also need and deserve to be paid for their time. So it's a really great way of facilitating that. And I guess for context and clarity, I'm not a natural entrepreneur. I never, ever wanted to run my own business. I never wanted to be a freelancer or a consultant. I loved the 9-to-5. I loved working for the man. I loved the man. We loved the man. We might touch on this later, but learning to pitch for new business, learning to understand where opportunities are and then ask for those opportunities is something I've had to work really long and hard at, and something that I'm looking forward to sharing. Hopefully I think I've done okay, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you today. Volker, Fantastic. I'll pass the mic to you.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, Volker.
Maybe I should get my mic involved as well. I never really use it unless I do podcasts. So I'm Volker. I'm originally from Germany. Just in case you are wondering about the name, my parents never gave me an international name, for better or for worse. So came to the UK 22 years ago and never worked in Germany. So always worked in the UK and always worked in sales. And I stumbled into consulting, if I say a few years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago. Probably born an entrepreneur, but never really discovered it until 4 or 5 years ago. So maybe should have done my own company and launched something much, much sooner. So I position myself as an interim and fractional chief revenue officer, sales consultant, VP sales, head of sales, whatever label I say a company or anyone wants to give me. So what it means essentially, I go into companies either as an interim or fractional, head of sales, salesperson, can be hands-on, can be hands-off, depending again on the assignment. So I work a lot with startups at the moment, do a lot of sales coaching as well. So I go into small and large companies to work with their sales team to improve the sales performance. But then also what works really well for me, at least at the moment, is going into startups, running workshops, like 2.5-day workshops on what are you selling, why are you selling, to whom are you selling, how are you selling, and then have ongoing, if I say, coaching, consulting, mentoring with them on a if I say weekly, bi-weekly basis. And again, with some startups, it's more hands-on, where I'm essentially the salesperson. With others, it's more an advisor, more board member. So it really varies on the company. And also do sales consulting. Where I'm at the moment working on go-to-market strategy for, funny enough, the German market. So that's a bit about me. I saw a few comments already in the chat. So I'm based down in Brighton, or just north of Brighton, so in West Sussex. Married, 2 children. So it's not all about work, as they say, right?
Absolutely not.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the introductions. Okay, so I'm looking around the people, and the names that I recognize are people I've spoken to, and I can already see we've got a CFO, a CTO, a CDO, as Chief Data Officer, another person in sales and revenue. So I know we've got a big kind of a variety of people that are just tuned in today. But the way that I would kind of say to position the advice that I'm asking you to give is almost think about this as people that are either new into the fractional space or maybe coming to the end of a few clients and trying to think, how can I get more? How can I get better at my outreach and building new connections and ultimately converting connections into business, into clients? So I'm going to start with just establishing new relationships, just a few questions around that. Do either of you have an approach? In fact, Emma, I wouldn't mind starting with you on this because there was something that you said in the interview that you did on the AWS that was really, really strong here. In terms of establishing new relationships, in terms of how you might go on that, and maybe this more strategic approach that you would bring, would you mind just sharing a bit of advice there on your thoughts around making sure you know who you're going after and that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think what I said now. I hope it was useful. I think the thing you've got to, well, the thing I always try to remember is, we all hear this term personal branding, and it can make you feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes, but you, as a consultant, you are 100% a brand and you are a business. And I think we always need to remember that we as the individuals, we are still operating as a business, whether we're going into a business, whether we are functioning, behind a kind of a limited company of 1 or 2 or whatever it is, we are still and should really focus on performing ourselves like a business. So, and that can go in a few different ways. I think about in terms of kind of, I guess, getting in front of the right people. It's really understanding who it is that you're targeting and being very, very strategic about this. One of the first things we did was I did when I moved into the consulting space and obviously started building out Wisern as well, was really, really understood what I wanted. What do I actually want? Like, what is my North Star? And I know that sounds really, really obvious, but so often we do forget to do that real basic groundwork. Why am I even making this business? I guess, people talk about Simon Sinek's, Start With Why, really, really powerful, monumental book, but it's incredibly important to understand why we are doing what we're doing, who we are serving, and what we want the output to be. And yes, that can just be financial. Yes, it can be, but have an understanding of the kind of impact that you want to bring as well. And that will really help you then to define your target customer. And this can change, it will change, it will evolve. Nothing is concrete forever. And I really think learning comes through the doing as well. Get out there, start having conversations. It doesn't have to be pitching or selling, but start just having conversations, building relationships in the right area. And if it doesn't feel right, then pivot. That's okay. I remember when I started my production company, I wanted to sit within the I wanted to sit within the startup space. I felt like there was a real pivotal point where companies were going for their seed round or their first kind of raise, their first injection of cash. And they'd be bootstrapping beforehand. They'd be using friends of friends to create imagery, advertising content, and then suddenly, with an injection of cash, they would be able to realize their marketing strategy, and they would need someone very swiftly to come in and run that production to be able to execute on what they would have promised their investors. And I thought, this is a really smart angle, right? I'm going to clean up. I don't know anyone else doing this. And, it was really, really hard work to find that sweet spot. And I spent the first year just pitching like crazy, reading all the tech news, finding the right people, getting in front of them. And it really, really didn't convert to that much business. And the end of the first year, I set all my invoices side by side and I worked out, where was my work coming from? And I realized actually people were coming to me. That actually pretty much half of the value of the business that I'd done in the first year was people literally knocking on my door and saying, oh, hi, I know you, from the industry, blah, 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 blah. Can you help me with this? And I thought, why am I trying to get into this space where I don't belong? Where do I belong? I belong in the creative industry. I've been doing this for, at that point, 15, 16 years, whatever. This is what I know. This is what I belong. And I started to look at my skills and experience and realized that my years of working in advertising and understanding how ad agencies work was really unique and quite literally valuable. So in a long-winded kind of way, I realized that actually my customer was not who I thought. It wasn't these startups. It wasn't these guys about to kind of, raise and execute. That's a great idea. And I still think that's a great idea, but it's very hard to win in that space. The place where I belonged was one where actually I've been working my entire career. So I had to actually go back and look at what are my skills and strengths and weaknesses. Like, what do I really stand for? So there was a very big unpicking process that went through that first 18 months that then helped me to be really truly honest about who my ideal target customer client was, and then how I get in front of them. So, sometimes I guess that's a long-winded way of saying what we think we know is not always where we're actually going. So really, really understanding, I guess, impact-led. Why are you doing what you're doing? Who do you want to impact? What do you want the output to be? And then trying to guide that towards your customer all the way.
I think it's
I went in a bit of tangent there. I didn't mean to go there, but
no, but super interesting. And I think it's so true that and probably reassuring for a lot of people that maybe they're trying to do something and it's not happening, and be like, keep thinking, keep questioning, keep getting out there, keep talking to people, and eventually if you keep going, you will find your way. I think it's such good advice. And I think so many people are worried that they're not having the impact they should. And maybe it's because they're going in a direction that's not ultimately right for them. So yeah, no, great point. Volker, anything that you'd add to that in this kind of area?
There's not much to add, to be honest, right? It's what I do on a daily basis, right? I work with startups and say, who's your ICP, right? Who's your ideal customer profile? Who do you go after? How do you go after? And yes, you need to pivot, right? Is there product market fit, right? As simple as that, right? Talk to a few people and see if it works, right? And if you're not completely behind that purpose or that vision of your company, right, you can't sell it. It's like, anyone who ever worked in sales knows that, right? If you're not behind the product, you can't sell it. So having that vision, and then how do you best get to your target audience, right? Is it co-promotion? Is it your own network? And it changes over time as well, because you always start with your own network, and then you can either expand your network, or you might find ways of, I don't know, you go on podcasts or you go on Fireside Chats, right? Whatever works. Not that we're selling here today, right? But it's like the more people you talk to, the more things you do, the more of an image you build. So if I say contrary to you, Emma, I worked in the advertising industry, and I'm working less and less in that industry because I'm discovering so many other things I can do, or so many other industries I can work in, and I find that so fascinating. So I got a bit bored of advertising, to be honest.
Well, yeah, yeah, I'm a bit jaded about advertising, although obviously I still make it. But interesting enough, I work now, the majority of the thing, I work direct with clients. And actually one of the niches that I fell into was supporting and championing independent creatives. So when I started to dig down again in my ideal client, I realized I didn't want to work with ad agencies. All the stakeholders and the red tape and the, wading through treacle to get something made. And the sheer amount of money that is wasted in ad agencies. And I say that from someone who's been, inside. Oh, yeah. My last production I worked on was an £8 million production pot. But that's before even our, agency fees or anything. You just think that is an obscene amount of money to sell a product, but don't get me started on that. But so I didn't want to work with those people, and I made a real stand. I don't want to work with ad agencies direct. I don't want to work with agents either, because you're the pointy part. You're the one right at the end of the stick that everyone calls 4 o'clock on a Friday and says, "Oh, it's all going wrong. You sort it out." Bye. And that's not conducive for a family. I built this business just like you to fit around my family. Now it's grown so much that actually my husband's quit his job and I'm the breadwinner. But it's so I realized that actually independent creatives were doing their own marketing, they were winning their own business, they were going direct to clients. There's a real shift in the last few years of a lot of clients having internal agencies, internal creative sort of departments and running their own, creating their own marketing, commissioning their own advertising. And I realized that a lot of these independent creatives, they were doing all the heavy lifting themselves, all their own marketing promotion, but they weren't able to execute on those big jobs. They need a production arm to come and help them. But, I'm not an agent. I just step in, do the logistics they need, help them deliver a job, and then step away. And that was also really unique, because then I felt I had so much more control. And I realized that I actually run the job with the client, and I have all the control over the budget and the timings and the way the whole project runs, which is incredibly empowering. So again, just really refining that customer basis. And it helped me to understand how I spoke about myself as well, because suddenly it wasn't about all my outward face of comms being just a portfolio thing. I realized that actually who I'm serving is actually the independent creative community. Therefore, I should be championing them. Therefore, I should be giving over my social channels to them to share their stories and champion them and find things that help them, like awards and and talk about that stuff to bolster the community from the bottom up. And all that helped to kind of establish me as someone who was ready to give and ready to serve within that community. And that's, I guess, that's where I sort of started to go before, about thinking about yourself like a brand. What do I stand for personally? I stand for someone who's, who's going to support and uplift you and help you to get better, which then in turn, you bring work around back to me. But that helped me to understand my own tone of voice and how I was going to present myself out in the wider world. And then obviously the opportunities that you go looking for, which we've sort of touched on before. You said, Volker, about doing podcasts, doing fireside chats, doing those kind of things. But again, what is the purpose of them? Well, when I go do them in the creative industry, it's to help and support and share knowledge, and to support that industry to educate themselves and upskill. And that becomes a really fundamental part of my value, but also driving my activity, which in then turn becomes what you ask for in terms of opportunities.
100%. Right, Mark, I can see you've had your hand up there. Did you have a question you wanted to add?
Yeah, hi everyone. It was just something that Emma was just saying when she was talking about family and being called at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it kind of related, but got me thinking about when you're kind of working with clients, just in general, yourselves as consultants, for example, in a fractional role, slightly differently to being a permanent employee. Do you think it's important about building up a certain type of relationship as you're working with and building up? What I mean by that is that I'm very vocal about the human aspect of business, particularly around my area of expertise, around the technical side of the CTO. There are a number of, let's call them, laws and best practices that come under what you would call the socio-technical aspects of, technology companies, around how people are organized and how the communication channels can impact, software and technology, for example. And when I'm working with people, both internal and external, partly because of my personality, it's about building up perhaps quite a friendly relationship with clients, to find a connection with them somehow, so that you can then kind of become closer to them in some way, in my mind. Do you think that's something that's helpful, beneficial? Are there negative sides to that mindset?
Volker, do you want to start, or do you want me to,
I mean, you can start. The question was directed at you, but
oh, sorry.
No, sorry, I meant it was for everybody, or you know.
no, that's fine.
I think it depends on you as a person. So I am naturally quite gregarious, bit of a mother hen. I'm naturally very friendly. So I love to build human relationships. I think that's really, really important for me. However, I am very, very careful to ring fence and to create boundaries. And that is something I just think is incredibly important in terms of my working hours. I know people who very successfully have on their email signatures, I check my emails at this point of the day, and you will not hear from me, around that time. That's really tight boundaries. But when you're doing consulting work, for example, and you're doing very big blocks of deep work and deep thinking, actually, that's fine. I think that's fine to say, this is where I am. So the after 5 o'clock, no, I'm not picking up my phone. Absolutely not. Even though my business has grown, to the levels it has, both businesses, balance is incredibly important to me, incredibly important. I have a young family and I'm not going to sacrifice that. I'm sorry. It's one of the reasons that I'm meant to be going for a raise right now. We're not doing it because I'm very worried about, getting in bed with someone else and them dictating my terms. So I think, we all have different personal scenarios, and it's up to us to protect them. And I think if your clients are not willing to sort of work within those boundaries, and you can be friendly with your clients, but then you have your boundaries. And if they don't work with them within those, then that it doesn't feel like the kind of synergy that I want to work in. I know we don't always feel like we have the luxury to turn down work, but I think finding that cohesion between your clients where you have respect for both parties is incredibly important for me. Volker, how do you feel?
Yeah, you just mentioned it, right? We don't always have the choice, right? I guess it depends a little bit, which situation you're in. So in general, Mark, I agree, right? You should have a good work-life balance, and if I do a lot of coaching sessions, right, where I tell my clients, right, have a work-life balance, right? Don't work beyond whichever hours you choose to work, right? And a lot of us are sitting here as interim and fractional and go like, the reason we went into that space is so we can control our own hours, right? So I actually find if I'm more interim, so if I'm working with the company 3 or 4 days a week, I'm much better with my boundaries because, I'm almost becoming an employee. So I can say, okay, I'm, after 6, I'm not working. Whilst I do a lot of fractional work at the moment, which means it could be any hours of the day. So I'm an early bird, so I'm often, at my desk at 6:30 doing work for clients. But then I'm quite rigorous in terms of turning things off at 6 or 7 at night. And it's whatever works for you as a balance, if that makes sense. So, and I think if you have certain requirements or, certain standards or, whatever the case might be, what I, for instance, do, I block out time, when the kids come home from school or when the kids go to football training or whatever the case might be. So clients can't put time in my diary, right? I mean, I don't like other people controlling my diary anyway. So same with you, Emma, right? In that sense, but it's which boundaries you choose, right? But I have client calls at 7 o'clock in the morning, for instance, because it works good for me and it works good for the client. And I don't mind that, but I don't set the expectation that I'm available every morning at 7 o'clock, if that makes sense. So it's about managing expectations like anywhere else, really, I think.
Yeah, I think it comes down to clear transparency, doesn't it? At the beginning, we would usually always, always have a contract or a scope of work in place. And actually, it's just outlining into that scope of work, these are the permitted hours that I work within, or these are the areas I'm available, especially in the fractional community, because, we do take on so many multiple clients at once. It's very hard for clients to understand they're not the only client. And I think there's a delicate balance of how you phrase that to not make them feel like they're one of many, but equally to have them understand that, I'm not just on call all the time. So being really clear in your T's and C's when you set out on that relationship at the beginning, I think could be the really key point.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both. Similar to how I think, and it's just good to kind of have that reassurance, I suppose. But no, thanks.
Yeah, just on the fractional side as well, right? I don't dedicate any certain days to clients either unless they ask. Right. Okay. So, which again, if you look at an interim, right, if you're doing 3 days a week, it's usually, I don't know, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever the case might be, right? So I have one consultant client at the moment where I would say, okay, usually, I don't know, let's say it's a Tuesday, I'm working for them because, that's most likely when we're on client side. But other than that, no one dictates my hours when I work. So again, coming back to my early mornings, I can work between 6 and 9 and get 3 hours of work done and get them paid, right? Which is great. So, but you hardly ever get an email from me after 6 o'clock.
Yeah, same.
I have a question around I guess, Emma, what you were kind of outlining earlier was what I would probably call thought leadership, or what CMOs have told me is effectively thought leadership, right? Where you put out various content onto LinkedIn or whatever your channels are, and essentially that builds your brand and makes you a bit of a thought leader in the space, and in turn that should mean that you get some work. And I recently spoke to several CMOs, and they all basically advised I do the same, except for one who I spoke to 4 in the end. One said that he doesn't think it works. The other 3 all said definitely do it. It will definitely work, but you have to do it consistently. So I guess my question is really like, did you do that? Did you do it very consistently? How often did you post? And did you find it actually worked?
Okay, so yeah, building my profile in that way, in consciously as a thought leader, it has worked. I have had inbound work from people I didn't know, who've literally said, I've seen you online, can I talk to you about this? So yes, I think there's a couple of things. One, knowing the channels that you want to use that work for you, and understanding where your clients are and where they play is really important. You mentioned LinkedIn, and it's a bit of a no-brainer, LinkedIn at the moment. For me, in the visual industry, obviously Instagram is a huge part. Mm-hmm. And I do dedicate a bit of time to that. I usually use stories on Instagram. However, the issue I think with Instagram and Facebook to a large degree is that you don't get organic reach anymore. They're really pushing you to pay to advertise. So I actually think LinkedIn in all senses is actually a really interesting space still. I saw a little triangle diagram recently that basically said, this is the million people who are on there, X million, this is the people who are actually posting. And it's like 9%. Yeah, so you do get traction. And actually when I've posted things and they've been 2-3 weeks later, I still get people either commenting or giving me DMs about things. So I find that the reach that you get on LinkedIn and the longevity is really, really interesting. In terms of discipline, now this is where I say do as I say and not as I do. I try, in theory, I post one proper deep dive thought leadership piece a month. Reality is I don't. Smack. Okay. I think if I got back into the habit of doing that, I would probably have a bit more success. I am very lumpy, and I'd say it's definitely do as I say, not as I do. I know that consistency is the key, but life happens and things get busy. I aim to do one decent piece a month with some other posts, but actually any interaction on LinkedIn, it actually really helps to bolster your score. They have this score, it's called SSI score or something like that.
Yeah, the SSI score.
Yeah. So I'm in the top 1% or the 1% of my industry, and that's based on reposting other things with a bit of thought at the top, posting articles, but also just getting involved. It is a social platform, and getting involved in your community is really, really helpful as well. So if you don't have time,
you raise an interesting point there. So I don't do original thought leadership, but I'm going to start now, and I've started writing a few blogs, which I'm going to convert into LinkedIn posts. But I have been all these years, for the last 2-3 years, just been effectively posting articles that I'm reading, which I thought were interesting, and I want other people, but I haven't really found that to be at all useful. So like, I'm guessing you have to really be posting very original content. Do you find that if you just repost, or you post that you read something somewhere and you post a little paragraph from why you think it's relevant or whatever, do you find the reach for that doesn't really get very far?
Do you know what? It's really, really sporadic. So I can throw something up on a Tuesday afternoon and it sails for weeks. I can spend, hours crafting a really tight nugget of really insightful information, and my mum likes it, and that's it. You're like, really? It blows my mind. So I'm still very much playing with the algorithm to understand. I think reach is really important with people as well. So actually spend a bit of time. I've got I have a half an hour a day, non-negotiable in my diary for essentially for socials, whether that's Insta, bit stories and going on, but spending time in the community somewhere, giving, and whether that's just responding to things, ticking, liking things, oh, that's lovely, whenever, feeding back to people, reaching out in DMs, congratulating people, whatever, but just bolstering my community. And when I'm struck for time, that even just that little bit I find really, really helps. But connecting with other people. So I'll do big sweeps every now and then for creative consultants, creative mentors, photographers, art directors, art buyers, and I'll just have a look at who else is playing in this space that I don't know, but have lots of cross-pollination with, and I'll just make connections with them, send them a quick note. It's really lovely to connect. We've got lots of shared connections. I'm sure we can have a chat in the future. I'm not selling. I'm not, doing anything other than just trying to foster a wider community that I can then, obviously help and share, being the premise rather than buy, sell to.
Yeah.
But just, I think thinking about that as well as like a two-sided thing, giving out content, yes, great, but also what can I give to this community? How can I share to them? We need a bigger pool as well to have on tap. So it's a continually kind of cycle, but 15 minutes a day, whenever that lull is, of your coffee break, 11 o'clock, that's my 15 minutes on LinkedIn. Click, 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 click. Well done. Congratulations on promotion. Connect. It's not spammy because you're not doing it a lot. You don't get penalized, but you're feeding the machine.
Yeah,
and it loves it.
Great. That's great, Emma. Thank you.
Right.
I mean, there's so many theories around LinkedIn, and I don't know how many LinkedIn gurus I follow, but so it's not necessarily all about reach. So I for instance have a lot of reach on LinkedIn, and a friend of mine has less reach, but he knows everyone that he's connected to, which means he has a higher engagement rate.
Yeah.
And so his network works better than my network in terms of views and engagement. So that's something to consider as well as you build your network. Do you want to connect just with everyone, right? Or do you just connect with people you know? Other than that, I you're supposed to post the same time every day as well. So that's another. I think the algorithm likes that. Not more than, I think, one post a day, or at least 18 hours between posts, these kind of things. So there are lots of things out there in terms of, best practices. What I didn't know until, I started digging into it. If you I don't know, you have a thought leader in the industry, right? Or in your industry, you want to check in regularly in terms of what he or she posted. You can just bookmark their feed, right? So rather than, finding that person regularly, just find it once, click on, articles they shared or post or recent activity, and you can just bookmark that page onto your bookmark,
Cool.
your browser bookmarks. So that means and then you can name off these bookmarks however you like to name them, right? So I don't know, check in once a week, or, thought leader in the creative industry, or whatever it might be. And then just go through that, once a day, once a week, whatever works for you.
I find that's also a really good way of, when you're pitching for work, just the idea of really understanding who your target client is, finding that person, and without wanting to sound a bit weird and stalkery, but following them and interacting with them, but over a period of time. So you're not just jumping their inbox going, hi, give me some work. And this has really worked for me on a couple of occasions. There was I really wanted General Assembly was on my list. I wanted to do a talk for them. I want to work with General Assembly. Found the woman I had to speak to, kind of followed her. I just, would like and interact with her, think, oh, that's really lovely, thanks for sharing, kind of interact with her, pose a question back to her when she put things in there. And then we follow each other on the dots as well, which is like LinkedIn for creatives. And when she put up about, they were thinking about doing something during lockdown at a 24-hour constant global festival, I emailed her straight away and said, I've seen you've done this. Would either of these two talks be relevant for you? Here's a summary. Here's the benefit points. And literally her email back was like, you just made my day. This is so on point. We need to talk immediately. And we felt like we sort of knew each other because she'd she'd seen me sort of, you know, lurking around. She'd be like, who's this bird? And she'd done a bit of digging on me, and I'd obviously been following her. So we had this familiarity, we had this basis of relationship and trust already. So when I presented her with something that was really, really targeted, I knew her brand, I knew her audience, I knew what would resonate. Here's two options. What do you think would work for you? She was like, it's a complete no-brainer. And actually, I'm meant to be having a coffee with her, you know, next week. Our relationship has kept going, and she's actually bought products from me as well. When I've done like accountability sprints and things, she's, from a personal capacity, come and purchased products from me now. So our relationship has been going for about 4 years now, or 3 years since lockdown. But it started from me having her in my, you're in my site as one of my target customers. I'm going to really get to know you and what you're doing, and start sharing and being part of your community. And then when the time was right, going for the kill.
I mean, one other thing I would mention, whether it's LinkedIn or off LinkedIn, it's up to you, is newsletters, right? I'm a big fan of newsletters because they actually get into people's inbox. And if you know them, or if they subscribe, then, you know, usually they read them as well. So, you know, I have a big newsletter base. I then started moving it to LinkedIn as well. So, you know, I'm reaching 5,000 people once a month. And, you know, I think about 1,000 people are opening my emails, which is great, right? So even if they just read it because of me, you know, and I'm not saying I'm so important, but, you know, I'm sharing a bit of personal stuff as well, right? And people like to read that. They like to compare. That's what people do, right? You give something away for free, you know, they like it. So, you know, that's another way of engaging, rather than, you know, thought leadership pieces I always find difficult, right? Where do you publish them, right? If you publish them as a LinkedIn article, you know, people might not read them, they might not see them, you know, so yeah, just another way of engaging with your target audience.
I've seen people getting into Medium a little bit recently, trying to move into that space. It's been a real conscious effort. The people I know who have done it have made a real conscious decision to post regularly on Medium and or Substack. Yeah, Alex had just seen it pop up in the chat, or Substack, exactly. But it's been a very core part of their strategy. This is something I'm going to target. I'm going to put time and energy into this, and I'm trying to reach this audience as well. So again, it's not just spray and pray. You know, it can't. And I actually think this is what you were talking about earlier, Barry, about knowing your client. It can't just be like, I hope that works. You know, it's got to be really targeted and really strategic. Where are your people playing? How do we get in touch with them? I love that idea of the I think that is at 1930s advertising concept of the 7 points of visibility. Like, you have to see something 7 times before you buy it. That idea, which now I think is like 16, well, everyone's got a different idea, 16, 30 times before you actually buy it, because we're bombarded with advertising. But I think going back to the early point about you being the brand, you know, you need to make sure you are being visible in people's periphery, in the space where they are naturally playing, and you feel like you belong there, because, you know, I do think like relationships are based on trust, or work comes through relationships are based on trust, and trust almost comes through familiarity as well. And sometimes that could be, you know, too much familiarity is a bit annoying, but if you're saying the right message, you're giving the same consistent message, and you're coming across in a way that is human and approachable and works for them, then actually by building this familiarity, you start to get that level of trust. And then after a time, when you are selling, it's a bit, you know, it should feel like a no-brainer for them to buy into that.
So since you mentioned Medium, there's also Maven. I don't know if anyone tried Maven before, but it's like Medium for video, right? For online courses. So I signed up for it, but I haven't had the time to really look at it. I started doing my own webinar, which I launched my first one in 3 weeks' time. So that's something else, right? You can do webinars.
What format are you using for that? How will you host that?
Tevent. I think that's what it's called, Tevent. It's a platform. It's free of charge. To be honest, that's why I chose them. I had a longer chat with them yesterday. Their sales rep called me and they said, why did you choose us? I said, by price, right? If you look at Zoom provider, it's super expensive, right? And essentially you could just host a normal Zoom call, right? And obviously the difference is you then have people looking at you, which is also fine, right? You can make it more interactive. Whichever platform works for you, right? But
yeah, definitely.
I'm just going to say, so it's obviously 10 minutes past when you were expected. I don't mind in the slightest. Emma, Volker, if you're happy, and if everyone else is happy, great. I'm happy for this to go. I've got a hard stop at 2, but if anyone's got to go, feel free to drop off. And yeah, absolutely, really, really grateful, Emma, Volker, especially for you guys coming on and being happy to share. But yeah, I saw Vesna, I saw you had your hand up as well. So I'll say that if anyone wants to drop off, please do. If you're happy to stay, please do. And yeah, just ask away. So Vesna.
Yeah, I haven't even formulated it yet, but I'm going to play the age card here. So, because I've been doing this for over a decade, and I've been working with startups mostly. So a lot of younger people. So a lot of the things that we're talking about here don't necessarily apply, especially to the 20 to 30 range right now. They're all on Discord. They're doing things. I don't know. They're not going to read newsletters, stuff like that. So I don't know if you have any ideas on how to reach them other than playing video games and being on Discord.
You need to be on Discord as well, right?
Yeah, I do, but I can't figure out, like, I've got a bunch of them, but I need to find out which ones are good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is still massive as well. I know a lot of people who are still having great success in YouTube. Yeah, Discord, it is a big player, definitely with that demographic. Again, I think it just goes back to research. If you're trying to reach a particular demographic, where do they play? I heard someone say yesterday on a webinar that I forget the example, but basically when they looked at their customers, they realized that a lot of their customers were coming from Bing. And I don't think I've looked at Bing.
Oh my God. Okay.
Didn't even know it's still going, but they were like, an alarming number of our customers are coming from Bing. And that is just mind blowing. So you know what? Let's run some ads on Bing.
There are a lot of people actually, sorry.
Yeah. No. But so it's understanding your customers' behavior and where they are, and then, getting in that space with them.
Yeah, I'm hearing that a lot of people in that space and so my oldest is 21. So even from him, I'm hearing a lot of people are getting away from Google. So that could be a possibility.
Yeah.
They want to get away from the entire Google suite and have nothing to do with it. So interesting. Okay, that's a good point.
TikTok, I suppose, for that audience as well.
Oh God.
Yeah.
The TikTok audience gets older now as well, which is quite interesting to look at that.
True.
But yeah, in terms of Bing, it's actually when I was agency side before, Bing used to be an older demographic, usually male and older.
Yeah.
And for gambling clients, higher spending than people coming from Chrome, because they usually, because they were more mature in their career, usually had more disposable income.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Your gambling company, obviously, so there are always nuances. You have to do your research, right, in terms of where's your audience, where are you going to put more money. So for that gambling company, it was definitely Bing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Would have guessed.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for that. And thanks, Vesna, for the question. Richard, see you've got your hand up there.
Yeah. Just before I get on to my questions, just talking a little bit more about Bing, actually. What I've seen in the past is quite a lot of corporate networks won't have Google on them. They won't allow people to use Chrome. So Bing is the default search for if you have to use it, Microsoft Edge. So, and pay-per-click is normally cheaper on Bing than it is on Google as well. But anyway, which is kind of nice to know. I was going to ask you a question. Really, this seems like a little bit of a detail and a little bit random, but I'm just getting back into the sort of the fractional side of things. And I wrote a couple of proposals this week for potential clients, and I felt really awkward writing in the first person. So, I would recommend, I would work like this, my way of working. It felt really awkward. Should I be doing that, or should I be doing sort of, a more sort of corporate speak, a more formal speak? I don't know. What do you think?
Depends on your personal brand, right? It's my initial reaction, right? But so I chose Ballueder Partners as my company name, not because I have lots of people working for me, but it just sounds bigger. So I can talk as we Ballueder Partners do, rather than I do. Again, depends how you want to position yourself, right?
Yeah, I probably do want to position myself as me for the moment. So
okay.
Yeah, Richard, when I first started, everything I did was I, but now I'm 3 years in. and I use we a lot more.
Right.
But yeah, when I first started, it worked much better because much like Emma was saying, you're essentially selling yourself, and I kept on hearing people tell me people buy from people.
Yeah.
So when you're first establishing yourself, the advice I have was you sell yourself. But then if you get obviously grow and get bigger, then you can start saying we a bit more because you have a bit more of a client base.
Yeah, I do. I do struggle, but I'm a fractional marketing director, CMO.
Oh, so you know all about this then, anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
up to a point, right? It's. I could easily market one of your products. Marketing myself, it's a little bit harder.
Yeah, but yeah.
Classic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, actually. It's something that I was kind of going backwards and forwards with, because, you know, I think it comes down to your operating model and how you know, along with your personal branding, if you're operating as, for example, a sole trader or through a limited company. So for me, obviously on LinkedIn personally, talk about me, but then with a small limited company, I've only just started within a few weeks. The content for me, the way I write it there, although it's only me, I speak as though it's the company writing. So I say we, and it's that kind of thing that I then try to think, if I'm kind of sharing content of mine as the company or of the company as me, I then get myself tongue-tied thinking about grammar and context and things like this. But yeah, that's a good question, and it's I'm curious how much of a difference it makes, or if it's only down to your own preference in terms of personal branding, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
Guy, did you have an answer to that question, or are you?
Sorry, I didn't
follow-up question?
really make that much of a question, but do you think there's a preference or a benefit to one type of approach to another when you are in reality a single person providing a service in the way that you brand yourself?
So from my perspective, I just kind of think it's, I don't know, maybe it comes over as slightly false if you are sort of pretending to be a sort of a larger business than you really are. But I guess what I'm selling at the moment is my personal experience and my personal skill set. So I guess for me, it's got to work to market myself rather than a business, right?
Could I just jump in at this place? Hi, everyone. It's Guy Pearson here, new to the group here. It's a really interesting question, Richard. I mean, I'm a interim sales director, and I think you should be proud of you and I wouldn't worry about, because, you know, if you are like myself, a limited company, but it's me, they can find that out. You know, they'll find that out quite easily. So if you're putting on the Margaret Thatcher we, then it jars and it becomes less authentic, I think.
I should say it's not about, oh, I'm so sorry.
No. I was just gonna say, I feel the same. I did the same when I first started. I thought, you know, the production company had to be we as a production company. Then actually, it just felt a little bit pretentious, and you know, I'd say a little bit wanky to say we when actually it was just me as a mum in my lounge on my own. It was like, this is ridiculous. And actually, then I heard, you know, the same thing people buy from people. They actually wanted to hear about my experiences, you know, and what happened behind the scenes. And I still use the term we because we are a collective, you know.
Sure. I'm
the only permanent employee, but I have, you know, it takes a team of, you know, up to 40, 50 people to bring a production together. So it's my black book, which is, and every team is built for every brief. So you build a team for the right brief. So it is a collection of we, but I still make sure that I am still the voice of it and still the face of it as well, which was excruciating to begin with, to be the face of it, but just, you know, it had to happen.
I wouldn't worry about it. I'd just be proud of the value you're going to give them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks, guys. I understand. Appreciate it.
I think I'd also suggest, and I do this a lot, is I find one or two people whose work I absolutely love, because I find it very hard to market to myself. It feels a bit icky to get on LinkedIn and do all that. But I've seen one or two people whose work I just love, and they feel so genuine and authentic And I just love to interact with them and see what they've done. And I would like other people to feel that way about the things that I do. So that feels like a really great hook to just observe it and think, right, what can I do to express myself?
Yep.
It's interesting. We big businesses, we always make brand guidelines. All big brands and kind of companies have a really usually a big boring tome of brand guidelines. But I made a little brand light, I suppose you call it, in Google Slides. Ooh, illicit, but really, really simple tone of voice. And it was as simple as kind of what words do I use? What words do I not use? And I've got a tendency to speak and write really formally, please find attachment. And I know that's not how a lot of my clients respond in the creative space. But it's my sort of default setting is to be incredibly English, very pompous. So I had to set myself a list of words that I do use, also that I don't use, because I don't want to sound like, mid-40s mum trying to be really cool and down with the kids, way. So I had to really kind of separate what's really cringeworthy words that I don't use and what is relatable language that I do, and write those down in a sort of very light touch brand book, tone of voice doc that no one else is going to see apart from me. But when I'm writing social media, posts and things like that, it's just a good reminder to be like, actually, I don't sit in this space. I sit here. My company sits here. And actually it becomes much more, as you practice it, much more about the way you speak as a person. I know in a proposal that's slightly different, but I think there's still words that you would be comfortable using in the context of your own voice, and then words that you perhaps would part for being much more corporate. And I wonder if that's an exercise you might want to go through as well. And then there's other color pages as well of like, what colors do I use? What fonts do I use? Giving yourself a couple of pages of just how you present yourself visually online. I think your visual tone of voice is as important as your written and your oral tone of voice. So outlining that for ourselves can be quite a fun little exercise just to do, but it doesn't have to drill too deeply into it.
What did you call that, Emma? Something light?
A brand light.
Brand light.
Like a brand tone of brand book, but not.
Yeah, I like that.
3 pages max.
I think it really resonates the sort of being down with the kids side of things.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time, right, not everybody on the call, but looking around the call, there are some people who are sort of a little bit older, such as myself, and quite a lot of the time. But if you're dealing with startups and you're dealing with founders of these businesses, they're like 20 years younger than you, right?
Yeah.
And although I'm quite young in my outlook, my wife might say immature. I need to be careful that I'm not trying to go too far in one direction or too far in the other direction, right?
But by definition, Richard, if they're 20 years younger, you've got 20 years more experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is the value of what you're giving them.
Yeah.
They might not know
absolutely.
it. They might not know it. They might not agree with it, but that's it. You can't buy that 20 years of experience that they haven't got.
Well, they can buy it from me.
They can buy it. That's right. I was doing the figuratively. They should buy it. Yeah, they should. But you know what I mean. They can't get your experience.
Yeah. No, for sure.
And that's precisely why you're working with them. But I think what you're saying is, you don't want to go in with the cap on backwards, being like, "Hey, kid,"
Yeah.
it does, authenticity.
Can I just? I'm
just put a hoodie on and call it a day.
I'm keen to finish on one thing just before we do wrap up. Most work that most fractionals get is going to come from your network, people you've worked with or friends of friends, that kind of thing. It seems to be true across every industry, across everyone I've spoken to. Most of the actual paid work comes from people they know. So one thing I am keen just to get Emma and Volker your thoughts on here. We've all got networks. We're all on LinkedIn. We're all on Instagram or whatever. We're all on various different networks. If you've got loads of contacts already, how do you convert those contacts into customers without sounding like a salesman? Like, this has been asked on a bunch of different times, a bunch of different ways. How do you don't want to kind of go to someone and be too obvious, but at the same point, it's going to be the make or break for a lot of people entering into fractional. Can they do that? Do you have any tips, advice, tactics, anything at all on how to do that?
Do you want me to start, Emma?
Yeah, as a salesman, you've got to start. You've got to lead this one. How do you not do your job?
No, I mean, you know, how do you sell without selling? You build relationships, as simple as that, right? But if I say you need to let people know at some point why you build those relationships. And being German, I get away with being very direct sometimes. so you know, classic example, I have someone, you know, I know from the industry, and I didn't, you know, I had a contract that ended earlier than anticipated. So I just picked up the phone and I said, mate, I need work, you know, you have to give me work. He didn't, unfortunately. But I haven't contacted him for about 4 or 6 weeks now, just, you know, let it cool down, and then I re-engage, because I know there's work, you know, I know there's work coming. And it's persistency as well. So, you know, give you another example. I had someone who I've known for a few years. He wanted to give me work back in, I think, September last year. And then he sold his company to another company, or he sold his company. Essentially, he goes like, oh, don't worry, I'll get you in. And then about 2 months into that company, he goes like, oh, there's no chance I can get you in anytime soon. He said the end of Q1, which, as we all know, was 20 days ago, and I still haven't heard back from him. He knows I exist because I've engaged with him on LinkedIn. So he knows I'm around. And coming back to Emma's example, right? You still engage with those people, and you still, you know, you're front of mind. So every now and then you see what have they published on LinkedIn, you make a comment, you like something. And then if you haven't seen anything for about 4 or 6 weeks, you just reach out, you know, just a WhatsApp, right? Or an email, have a reason to reach out. And I think that's, for me, that's where the newsletter comes in as well. You know, in my newsletter, I regularly mention, you know, I still have capacity. You know, I can still take on new clients. You know, people go like, oh, what is Volker doing again, right? And, you know, maybe throw in an example. Is this persistency? Is talking to lots of people, but also being direct. You know, we all need work. We all need work to survive, to pay the bills, right? We all have a, you know, have family or not family, but we have mouths to feed. So yeah, just be direct and say, you know, do you know anyone who's looking for, you know, for my services? And then they go like, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. You know, why don't you come and work for me? So
yeah, I think honesty is definitely one of the things. Honesty and transparency. People often think that, you know, there's a perception that we're all really busy. You know, you put so much time into being busy on social. Oh, I'm gonna, you know, I do it as well. I'm gonna shoot here. I'm out doing this. And there's this perception that I don't have space or time because I'm always just so busy. And I'm not glorifying busy, because I think it's a really dangerous thing. But I think being really honest and saying, I'm coming to the end of a thing, I have an opening, you know, and making it, I've got an opportunity, I have opportunities where I've got space again. Isn't that wonderful thing? I've got space to take on one client to do this, or I've got X amount of time coming up as of this week. You know, I see a lot of photographers doing it. I'm now taking bookings for this month only. And you give the perception that the other month is full, but lucky you can get in here. And then always going in, knowing and being clear about your value proposition. I think that's the other thing, is knowing, because like you say, we have all these connections on LinkedIn, especially, you don't always know what people do. And it's allowing yourself to be front and center of mind at the right time. You know, same advice that we give to photographers and creatives all the time. People aren't always ready to buy right now. You know, you might want to work with Nike, but you know, Nike aren't always ready to buy right now, but you are the right creative for that brief. But if you are constantly sending them new work or a case study or a particular article that you've seen that is relevant for their business, you know, I've seen this, I thought you might be interested to see this that was in Harvard Business Review, whatever it is, you're nurturing that relationship and you're constantly reminding them that you are there and present, but without, you know, selling. It's just being, unfortunately, sometimes it is being in the right place at the right mind, but also reminding people that you're available. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we started Wisern, was because creatives want to speak to, you know, the head of the BBC. They want to speak to the person who commissions photography for Netflix or Warner Brothers or, you know, GQ magazine, but they don't know how to get in touch with them. They don't know that those people are available or willing to talk, and it's excruciating knocking on doors and saying, hi, can you bear for, no, you can't. Okay, that's really awkward. Whereas actually, if you put a marketplace together and say, would you like to speak to the former head of the BBC? Yeah, he's there, he's ready, he wants to share, wants to help you. It makes it really transparent. So letting people know that you have space, it doesn't make you feel desperate. You're offering something of value. You have something incredibly value to share. So, you know, offering up, I think, is a bit of a no-brainer.
Could you, sometimes, occasionally, I've seen someone pretty much put that on the LinkedIn post, that they've put a little I don't know, they might have shared whatever they shared, but then at the end said much like you're saying, Emma, like I've got capacity opening up next month or whatever. Is it as simple as that? Like I am just, I don't know, too introverted to put myself out there on LinkedIn enough to like do that. But I do wonder if it's just something I should do and see if any work comes in off the back of it. Because I do have lots of connections with founders of various startups on LinkedIn. And I know that a lot of them don't have any sort of CFO support whatsoever.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes they don't think they can afford it. I think this is one of the crazy things. Again, go back to Wisern, but we're about sort of disrupting consultancy, because micro businesses in the creative sector do not think they can afford a consultant for £2,000 a day. But sometimes they don't need a consultancy piece. They need to speak to people like you. I need to speak to a CMO. Can you review my marketing strategy and tell me if this is correct, or if I'm barking up the wrong tree? It'll take, and can we do that in 2 hours? Can you review it? And then feedback. And that's it. I will do all the changes. You don't need to come to me with the bit that, and maybe a CFO, am I structuring this in the right way? So I think understanding what your value proposition is and just offering it is incredible. And with a proof point as well. This is what I do. This is what I could do for you. Do you need to have a power hour? Do you need a 1 day a week? Do you need something consistently? I can do one-off things or a long consultancy piece. This is what I'm available for. I think that transparency is really, really key, but reminding people as well. I see people often saying they're available for speaking gigs, and I'm a bit too embarrassed to kind of do that. For International Women's Day, I thought, no, I'm going to do this. I've just been asked to do another one. So I got on LinkedIn and I said, I've just signed up for another thing for International Women's Day. I'm really keen to work with brands that I haven't worked before. If you'd like me to come and talk about these 3 points in your office. And I got an email from really, really random, from like council's greater authority, randomly, like, so yeah, can you do an online talk for my whole company, basically? I was like, paid as well. So random, awesome. So left field of what I normally do. And of course I was like, yes, of course I can. Thank you very much. But the opportunity came. I have no idea who this woman is. I've never spoken to her before, but she was obviously searching for International Women's Day speakers. And I'd said, hello, I'm happy to do this. And she was like, great, got some money. And you have to obviously deliver the goods as well. But so I think showing that you are willing, because why would anybody take a punt that I might want to maybe do a talk for IWT, like, without making it really clear and what I would speak on. So yes, park the shame, park the vulnerability, park all that. You are offering something of incredible value to somebody, and you can make such a difference to their business. What an amazing thing to offer. Could
I just add one thing from a sales perspective? You've got to solve the problem for the client.
Oh yes.
Selling, lots of people think selling is buy me. When actual professional selling is, you've got to identify the problem your potential client has even before you meet them. So if you're meeting them saying, this is the problem you've got, this is the solution to it, that's the investment in solving that problem.
That's your value proposition, isn't it? That's what you're looking
exactly. If you're not solving a problem, move on and find someone who has got a problem.
Yeah,
and I fully understand why people think salespeople are awful people, because they think I'm going to talk at them. You've got to see yourself as a doctor. You ask them the question. So tell me the issues in the business. Oh, it's really, sales are down. So why are sales down? Tell me about why you think sales are down. And you become a doctor, not a salesman. You've got to identify the problem and then fit your solution to that problem.
I think one of the things I did, I spend a little bit of time doing, and I usually do this on Instagram, but is a lot of polls to kind of find out what people are struggling with. What is the vibe amongst the community at the moment, especially after the budgets are announced, as we go into mid-year Q2, obviously cost of living crisis. I went to a really interesting dinner a couple of weeks ago held by the Fast Company, which was about stability in a storm, basically. And before that, I was, obviously online saying, right, I'm going to this dinner. What I'm going to be hearing from these speakers, I'm going to have a chance to speak to them. What do you want me to ask them? What are the issues that you're facing? What do you feel we need to, how are you feeling in this current climate? But, are you struggling to find work? Do you feel like the cost of living crisis is having an impact on you? Will it in the immediate future? And that was really, really interesting insight for people to just give me that information to understand that perhaps how can I, it sounds really unethical to say not how can I sell to them, but what can I do for them? What can I provide them that's going to help them through this really, really horrible time where people are genuinely feeling the pinch, or worse. So what problems are they face in their business? And that could be the one-to-one chats where you just, if you have people who are trusted in that industry, you say, can I have 5 minutes conversation with you to understand the problems, not to sell to you, but just to get an understanding of perhaps where you can sit. Where does your niche sit? What is your value proposition? What's your niche offering that you can really give to them?
Guys, I'm gonna, sorry, I've just seen the times sort of pushed on. Sorry there, Guy, to cut in
sorry,
there.
don't worry, carry on.
I'd highly recommend everyone connects on LinkedIn or through the FCC Slack group or however, but get to know each other. Like, this whole thing that we're doing, it's all about connections, relationships, sharing as we're doing. Again, thank you so much for joining us for our 30-minute chat an hour and 10 minutes ago. And it must be, you guys must be interesting to have kept people around for so long. So yeah, really appreciate you giving up your time and opinions, and everyone else here for the questions. So yeah, we announced today our first unconference. So if you're in London, you fancy coming along to the unconference, May the 10th, I think it is, in the evening. It's all on the group. Other than that, we'll be in touch later just for some feedback and that kind of stuff. But other than that, thank you, and we'll see you again next time.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
For coming. It's been great. Bye-bye.
Thank you.